everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to our, as Joe stated, our fourth and final webinar in a series. We've planned about 45 minutes for this webinar. We'd like to get some questions in. We'll probably be you can post questions throughout the webinar, and we'll be answering them as the topics become relevant. If not, we'll try and save some time at the end when we wrap up to answer those if time permit. Just a few other housekeeping notes. We know from other webinars, and Joe mentioned it a little bit, that we've attended and conducted, by the way, that sometimes the platforms are a little unstable and we have some bandwidth challenges. So if you have issues, we appreciate your patience, and please rejoin. We did add a dial-in number to the webinar, so if you do have challenges with the platform, but you'd still like to listen, please utilize the dial-in number. Otherwise, relaunch the platform, the actual webinar. We have found that Google Chrome is more preferred and seems to be a little bit more stable. So we just wanted to let everyone know that before we get started. So as we get into the webinar, again, thank you all for attending. We continue to have competing activities. We know that there's other webinars, and hopefully some of you are actually doing some restart activities, which is exciting. We haven't had that in a couple of weeks, so that'll be exciting to talk about. So we do appreciate your interest and your time. This is, again, the last of our webinar series. We've covered some important topics facing retail today, but we want to go without saying that recognize the support of the healthcare workers and our first responders. We really do appreciate everything that they are doing, as well as our essential retail partners and colleagues in the business. We know you're working hard to now hopefully reopen things, as I said, and keep things stable and keep things going for us. So thank you in advance for all of your help with that. So this series is really about helping our clients in the industry. We're passionate about what we do. We really want to share our expertise and hope that helps people along the way. This is by no means a Parker Avery commercial, but we want to make sure that we are offering our expertise where it makes sense. So last week, as part of our series, we really talked about industry emerging and what it means to begin the journey. Today, we're going to focus on the future and what that means. We're going to discuss some tools and approaches that you can use to better understand sales demands and actions, to make things and to start things out and move them forward, and also to continue to evolve. We think obviously the next few weeks and months are going to be interesting for everybody. We know things won't be going back to the way they were. We want to make sure that we're helping everyone, get stable and continue to evolve forward. Just as a note, our sessions will be recorded. So they will be available on our website after, if you'd like to re-listen, or if you want to forward the site to any of your colleagues that you think might be of interest. So I will now talk about and introduce the panel. The first guy there on the left is Sam Iosevich. He is new to Parker Avery. He has just recently joined us as our Chief Analytics Officer and Managing Partner. Sam's been designing and implementing retail forecasting solutions for over 20 years. He started when he was 2. Yes. He's really pioneered dynamic aggregation, and the solutions have been used by some of the largest retail and consumer goods globally. The other guy there on the right side is Joe Skorupa. He probably is known to most of you. Joe recently left RIS News after about 20 years. Again, started when he was 2. He's been an industry recognized subject matter expert on all things retail and CPG, and we're really delighted that we've been able to have him on this webinar series with us. And for myself, my name is Amanda Astrologo. I'm an associate partner with the Parker Avery Group. I've been with the firm for just over 5 years, where I came out of industry to join the consulting world. I've held leadership roles within merchandising and planning organizations, and really have focused on allocation, replenishment, and demand forecasting. And with that, I'll hand it over to Joe.
Thank you, Amanda. Sense of relief. Can you feel it? It's beginning to happen in retail and business in general, and all of us in all of our lives. Now, Amanda, one message that should not be lost as we pivot beyond shelter at home is that the store associate and our delivery workers, and boy, has delivery taken a front seat, in our lives recently, they have earned the high respect from shoppers during this time of crisis. They labored with grace and dignity in dangerous times to supply us with access to food, medicines, and other essential goods. And although they are not critical care or emergency responders, their work was really seen as essential in tough times. And as a result, many people think they deserve the respect that comes with the label hero, and that many people are using to describe them. So this is just a reminder that, when we reopen stores, let's be sure to live up to the high bar set by retail's frontline workers and our back office workers. This means that reopening stores in a time of social distancing should be done in a well-planned, responsible way that ensures the safety of customers and workers alike. With a focus on health, clear signage, well-defined tasks, meaningful training, and calm, assured, supportive leadership. Now, as the next slide indicates, there are many things that we don't know about day one, when our stores, are going to reopen, or more accurately, when they reopen on multiple day ones that will occur state by state and city by city. And we've covered many of these unknowns and how to manage them in our previous webinars. Let me say that one of the biggest unknowns is managing the inventory distortion that our planning and forecasting tools have put in place and set in motion before the crisis struck. These tools predict the future for retailers and enable them to place bets on what will sell, how fast it will sell, and in what quantity. Now, however, as retail gets back to work, we know that we can't fully trust these planning forecasting engines for the guidance we trusted them for in the past until they become recalibrated. Now, of immediate concern is the need to rebalance inventory to optimize sales. This means moving out of sync spring, for example, and seasonal products out of stores and restocking with merchandise that has been recalibrated for both quantity and relevance. Predictive analytics will play a crucial role in making this happen. And it will also help us plan the future when we plan and think about the rest of the year ahead. Now, in extreme times like these, there's a big caveat that emerges with these tools, and that's the historical models they are based on can be seriously compromised. So, Amanda, what are the major factors retailers need to consider and steps they need to take to get their planning and forecasting tools back into ship shape so they can meet growing but altered consumer demand when stores reopen? So,
Amanda. So what we're going to look at is we're going to try to understand what are some of the issues that we will see coming out of this, right? How do we recover and react to those issues, right? And then how do we evolve after we get past the crisis? Obviously, there's some initial things that are going to have to be done, but once we do that, how do we evolve so that the next time we see a disruption, hopefully not something like this, how do we adapt and have an easier time of it? So those are the things that we're going to be covering in the rest of the webinar.
Sounds good.
All right, so in terms of learning, right, what do we have to understand just coming out of reopening the stores and just what are we likely to see? Okay, so again, not there could be some grocers out there, and maybe you haven't seen this disruption, but for the rest of us, where you've had store closures, you're going to see significant disruption in your sales patterns. And what does that mean? So the sales patterns from 2020 are going to look very different than they did in 2018 and 2019. What does that mean for you? Many of your execution systems, so your everything from planning, replenishment, especially where you have automated purchase orders that rely on your forecasting, right? Those systems tend to use the traditional time series approaches, and they rely heavily on the recent data. So what that means is that the forecast, as you come out of this and the stores reopen, your forecast systems are going to give you spurious results, right? And so some intervention varying amounts of intervention is going to be absolutely necessary if you're going to continue to rely on those systems. Look, we've never seen anything like this before. So if you're a merchant or in the retail work, you haven't seen anything like this. But guess what? Your analytical systems haven't seen anything like this either, right? So we're all going to have to adapt. So how do we do that? Let's move on to the next. So the way that we're going to recover from this is first and foremost is there's going to be some relying on your gut, right? So some intuition is what I like to say is always start with the easiest answer, right? And then see if more complexity is required. So for example, look, you're not going to be able to throw out all of these forecasting systems. They're intertwined with many of the execution systems that you have in-house. Now that's everything from planning and pricing to fulfillment and operations, right? So we talked a little bit about the automated purchase order and the replenishment side, but you also are probably relying on this forecasting systems for pricing and planning as well. Right. So the first thing as you come back and you're getting these spurious results or spurious forecasts, what's the first thing that you can do? The easiest thing you can think of is to impute some of that demand, right? So start, like I said, start with something very easy. And something easy is LY and LLY. Basically, during the times that I was closed, what if I just take the sales from last year and in the year before and use that to impute my sales from 2020, right? Start there, look at the reasonableness of the forecast, and then think about doing something more complex. At the end of the day, it has to make sense. You have to believe what's coming out of these systems, what's going into your execution systems. Finally, people are going to make the final decision as to whether they are going to trust what's coming out of these systems. To do that, you have to, the mitigation plan that you are using has to be intuitive and has to make sense to you. Having said that, one thing that you are going to want to do is have a few easy metrics that you can rely on. All right. So before these forecasting systems were driving some of these execution systems, or a big part of these execution systems, what did you do? I mean, you relied on last year and LLY, right? Okay, make sure that you have those metrics readily available to you, right? So that you can, so that as the results are coming out of these forecasting systems, you can look and say, this actually makes sense to me, or it doesn't. Having said that, it's not only the magnitude of the sales that are going to be impacted. It's also going to be the sales mix as well. So as we come out of this, what you're going to notice is that, look, I have a whole lot more fashion inventory that, in terms of my mix than I ever did before. So what does that mean? You're going to rely on allocation a whole lot more than your replenishment. So your sales mix all of a sudden is going to look very different. And even for that, have a few easy sales metrics that you can rely on. So for example, just take a look at, as rolling sales mix, class or subclass level, whatever your hierarchy looks like. Have that readily available to you. So as your forecasting systems or these analytical systems are coming up with these predictions, you have something that you could look at and validate, right? We all know that if you don't have a good feeling about what these systems are telling you, you are less likely to use them and probably go with your gut anyway.
Hey, Sam, let me ask you a question about that feeling that the systems may not be as accurate now as they were in the past, and what you should do about it. I'm wondering how effective having a cross-functional team, participate in making those that mitigation plan, so that as you input that demand, that brings your recent sales cycle into the analytics and predictive analytic engine. I wonder if there isn't also, as you indicated, more complex decisions that have to be made as to where the stock is, how operations are going to get it on the shelves, how there's less foot traffic in the stores now, and I think that could come from a number of different departments.
That's a great point, Joe. I think that first of all, you're going to want to learn from each other, right? So not only are you not going to want to be siloed within the organization and learn, have to make sure that the folks involved in the planning functions are talking to the folks in the fulfillment function. Well, first of all, that's always important, but even more important now is that you learn from each other. And you know what? Even outside, the whole retail community can learn from each other, right? We all compete, but this is a time for us to come together, right? You can learn from some of your colleagues even outside of your enterprise, but certainly within enterprise, the communication has to be excellent at this point. In fact, some of the best analytical systems today, when you produce a forecast, regardless of the function, take many inputs into account. So even if you're doing planning, you may take a whole lot of other inputs that may have come from other functional areas into account, and that goes for any of those systems. But that's also true for the humans as well, right? Good communication is going to be key.
Sam, let me jump in. We have a good question from one of our retailers who's involved in our webinar today. And I think I'm going to shift it to our test and learn theme here. And what they're talking about is, in the short term, how many months should I forecast reduced sales for? And they go, for example, should it be 6 months? And I wonder if, instead of just thinking, well, let's forecast for 6 months, maybe they should forecast on shorter timelines, find out how accurate that turns out to be, and then gradually extend that period out. Yeah.
So the real answer, right? So the real answer is that nobody really knows. I mean, I'm going to be very honest with you. Nobody really knows how long you're going to see reduced sales. Okay. So if you've seen the models that come, where we all watch TV and we see different models associated with COVID-19. And many of them are very, very different. Okay, the same is true with your sales. Okay, no one knows for sure what's going to happen. Now, the best thing that you can do is to make sure that your data is in the best shape to be able to catch the trends, right, as the data is coming in. So if you have data and a forecasting process that's giving you a stable signal in the short, medium, and long term, right? You're going to be best positioned to be able to deal with what's coming ahead. But in terms of giving a timeline, if it's 6 or 9 months or 3 months, if someone is telling you that they know, run, because they really don't. Now, the one thing that you can do is this idea of test, learn, test, right? So learn one thing that you could learn quickly. So if I can go back to this, the idea of the sales mix, if you have an online presence, which many retailers do, you can learn from the changes in sales mix online and bring some of those learnings back to what's happening in your brick and mortar stores. I mean, the other thing that's likely to happen right now is you're not going to open your stores all of them at one time. You're likely to take a staggered approach, right? So learn from each of those phases, right, and bring that into this process. And that'll also give you an indication, the ones that you open early, how long will you see the differences in not only the magnitude of the sales, but the differences in the sales pattern as well. Okay?
Good question. Good answer.
All right. So in terms of evolving, so what happens right now? So after we get past all of this, right? So we have a mitigation plan. We have imputed some of the lost sales, right? We have some of our traditional forecasting systems that are operating in a way that allows us to move forward. We have their easy metrics and so on and so forth. So how do we evolve, right? So I don't want to say that there aren't better things that you can be doing. There are actually advanced algorithms that take many inputs into account, that don't just rely on continuous time series that could help you in future future crises, right, or future disruptions in sales. You have systems today. You have algorithms that are decision tree based and deep learning algorithms that allow you to take in things like hierarchy, plan, inventory, location attributes such as cases of COVID-19 in your trade area, for example, into account as they produce a forecast. And those systems will be able to adapt more quickly, right? So if you may not have those systems in place today, you may want to start to look at those systems as you move forward. Now, this is not to say that you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? This is to say that there's a lot of plumbing and a lot of good things that are there in your traditional forecasting systems. And what you can do is actually supplement that with some of the additional, some of the newer technology or forecasting algorithms that are there today. The other thing is that, in terms of evaluating some of the supply chain parameters, right? So you may look at, if you relied, taking a look at, your week of supply, making sure that your inventory was in a good place, going into this crisis. Look, we've been working with many of our customers where, look, we see that the weeks of supply was out of whack even before we got into this crisis, right? So there are things that you can do to make sure that you are in a healthy place. Even, that'll certainly help you as you move into a crisis like this one. So in short, you're going to want to think about a short, medium, and long-term plan to be in a healthier place before we get to the next disruption, because that disruption will come. It's COVID-19 today. I don't know what it will be, tomorrow, but there will be something. I mean, that's just the nature of things. In the short term, let's work on the systems that we have today. Let's impute demand. Let's make sure these traditional forecasting systems are working for us. Let's have a medium-term plan where we start to look at some of our inventory parameters, like weeks of supply, our service levels, and so on. By the way, those also improve as we have a better forecast. And then long-term, let's start looking at some of the newer AI and machine learning systems that are there that they can help us deal with the next crisis.
Sam, I want to follow up on your point about current tools and processes, but before I do, I want to make sure we're getting in our comments from our attendees to the webinar today. And so, a lot of people are dealing with immediate concerns. And so one of those concerns has to do with, the shape of demand. And there are certain theories out there. Some people call it a V-shaped return of the economy. Some people say it's related to, as one of our, attendees says, related to unemployment or employment, disposable income. All of these end up shaping demand, and they're really concerned about, the process or the management of getting that right. Any suggestions there?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Joe. So I would say that's, so some of these are macro factors, right? They're the U.S. factors, but they're going to affect each trade area in a different way. So if you look at a particular store, or if you look at the sales associated with the stores, then those factors, I call them location attributes, are going to affect each store differently. So as you implement more advanced AI, ML systems that take more than just a continuous time series into account, they can take some of these location attributes into account, that you can look at your unemployment, even, in this COVID-19 crisis, the cases of COVID-19 in a particular trade area, the faster you will be able to adapt to some of those location attributes. And this is why, at least in the mid or long term, you're going to want to look at approaches that take more than just your sales pattern into account.
Another good question from an attendee, and this has to do with time frame of mitigation. And this attendee is talking about implementing a demand planning system in as little as 6 weeks. But let me expand that for you. You can answer that question too if you want. But let me expand it and just say, how long do you think a mitigation process will take?
Okay, so this is where obviously the obvious answer is the shorter the better, and the way to make that process shorter, right, so you can get back to using some of the systems that you have in place, is to start with easy mitigation strategies. All right, the most intuitive ones, right? So some of those, where you have to impute this demand so that you have a sales pattern that traditional forecasting systems can use, right? Start with LY. Convince yourself that something more complex is needed. Okay, you can easily, when your stores open, when your stores close, right? You have the sales from the year before and the year before that. You can easily use those to impute the sales that you have. Something very easy and intuitive. And then what you do is run the system, right? Run the system and look at the reasonableness of the forecast, graph out the forecast values of moving forward for whatever horizons required. Take a look and ask yourself, is this reasonable? Does this look good to me, right? So easy and intuitive mitigation strategies are going to be the best at this point.
Okay, let me get back to my question about your current tools, and also one of our attendees is asking this question too, and I do know that many planners are using more simpler spreadsheet things, which also can have, as you indicated, algorithms based in a decision tree format, but nevertheless there are more advanced tools, and so I'm guessing that the more advanced tools that you have, the more flexible they could be. Can you describe how those more advanced tools can help you move faster in a time like this?
Sure. So first of all, those tools can take more inputs into account. Right. So let's say if you look at I don't want to throw out names like XGBoost or some of your deep learning, TensorFlow, or some of these deep learning algorithms and so on. But what they can do is they can take more inputs into account. Right. So instead of just looking at your near term and last year's sales, right, or looking at that sales pattern and just basically fitting to that sales pattern and extrapolating. That's traditional time series forecasting, whether you're talking about ARIMA or exponential smoothing models or anything like that, right? What they can do is actually take a whole lot of inputs like plan, hierarchy information, location area attributes like unemployment in your particular trade area or things of that sort to make the prediction. So they can faster adapt to crises like the ones, the disruptions like the ones we have today. But again, to emphasize, this is not something that you need to, if you don't have that in place right now, you don't have to worry about, this is not the first thing that you're going to want to deal with. Because if you're relying on traditional time series methods, they're likely, involved in every function of, that you have today. So they're in your planning, your pricing systems, your fulfillment systems, and so on. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you get those systems back up and running and giving you a result that you can utilize right away, right? As you get past this crisis, right? Then, and as you worked with also some of your, of course, your min maxes and inventory level, the settings and so on and so forth, right? Once you get past that and you start to get into the medium and long term, then what you can do is start to think about, well, wait a second, if I have this type of disruption again, let me make sure that I have the systems in place that I won't have to go through this type of mitigation in the future.
And then let's wrap up our talk about tools here. And I want to make sure I get everybody's comments in as much as possible. And we have someone who is certainly a cutting edge planner, and they're talking about video analytics and RFID and and leveraging AI. And the way I look at those tools is they help you be more responsive. They help you get more real-time data. They help you make decisions quicker and better and more accurate. And not everybody's going to have those capabilities, but if you're looking at investing coming out of this, heading into 2021 or in early 2021, the more you can invest in tools that give you faster data, faster responses, such as those that we were mentioned here, video analytics, RFD, et cetera, that's going to certainly give you an edge to be agile.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Right. Let's in terms of the recap. Again, there's a few basic points that I want to make sure that that we take away from this. A mitigation plan is going to be required. There's going to be some intervention that's going to be required. Regardless of how sophisticated your systems are at this point, I'm sure that there is some sort of forecasting system that's driving many of your functional areas, right? Therefore, some intervention is required. The easy and intuitive intervention is best to start out with. Then convince yourself that something more complex is required. Last year, your sales mix is going to be affected. You're going to be seeing some answers coming out of your system. Have a rolling sales mix report. As you start opening your stores to give you some sort of intuition as to, or invalidation for some of the analytics that are coming out, right? You've been relying on LOI and LOI for many years. Those type of reports are also a great thing for you to have at your fingertips, right? For validation. Finally, this idea of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So when I talk about some of these, many of your planning systems and your execution systems, there's a lot of plumbing around the analytics, right? So many times, instead of just ripping out the entire system, you can actually inject the newer analytics for a better answer. Okay, and lastly, limit manual intervention, right? So that goes to easier is best. Don't try to go product by product to try to impute your sales or see what you can do with the sales pattern. Try to use an easier approach that could be last year or last year, right? To grab some of your sales at a higher level and to impute some of that demand that you can then take down to the lower levels.
One of our webinar attendees today, Sam, has a question. I think we've addressed it a couple of times, but it's very specific. So let's address it specifically in the wording that they use. And they're talking about how should we make the balance of having a top-down plan, which after you've mitigated your system, you've got an overall plan. But how can we then have some bottom-up input that comes from specific locations and states that are rolling out more slowly? In some states, the foot traffic is going to come back more slowly. How can you balance the two, the top-down and the bottom-up analytics?
So this is where Amanda talked about me pioneering on this approach called dynamic aggregation. This was an idea of that there is no right level to aggregate your data, right? So if you look at a bottoms-up approach, you have very little information at the lowest level. So a fast-moving product is one per week, for example, per store, one per store per week, right? And you can't apply anything at that level. And as soon as you aggregate up and move towards a bottom-down approach, there's information loss. And like you said, there may be information in a particular store versus another store, and you lose some information. So there are approaches like dynamic aggregation, which allows you to aggregate that data to the right level, okay, where you have enough information, but you don't have this information loss to produce your forecast. So to your answer, and I think you were looking more for a less analytical answer here, but really may not be a less analytical answer. The question is between bottom up and top down, what is the better approach? They're both not the way to go. And really, for each of your store product combinations, each one of those has the right aggregation levels. And there are new techniques that allow you to aggregate your data to the right level to produce a stable prediction or forecast for the short, medium, and long term.
So for me, and I'm sure our attendees, that concept of dynamic aggregation is definitely one of the major takeaways here from our webinar today. Sam, do you have any last comments to add before we wrap up?
Well, the way that I look at this, things look a lot worse than they are. Look, we're all going to get through this. Times are going to get better. Keep a level head, and we'll all be better when we get through this. When we're on the other side of this.
Absolutely. As I said, there's a sense of relief, and it's great to be getting back to the work of retail, which I know we're also dedicated to. And I want to let all of our attendees know that we are going to provide a transcript of today's webinar in a blog, and also the webinar is available for replay as well. Just go to the Parker Avery website, and you'll be able to access that. Certainly tell your colleagues about it if they missed our webinar today. And Sam, thank you very much for providing us with that really good practical approach to recalibrating your predictive analytics. Much appreciated.
And Joe, thank you so much for your insights.
And thank you everyone for attending our webinar. See you again next time.
Thank you.